So this is chapter 2, starts on page 13 of the missing link, and it's called The Theosopher. Philosophers search for basic principles. They gain knowledge by reading books and studying other people's opinions and concepts, then mold them together with their own personal opinions of life. A theosopher's understanding comes from a direct experience, using his or her own innate knowledge, or if you wish, from what is sometimes known as original thought. And, you know, to me, what this points to is what's so critical. People are always asking the question, why there's so many books out now about the principles. Why should I read Sydney Banks? And it's because the original book that everybody else is working from, you know, had it was pointed to for them, was the original thought of Sydney Banks. But that original thought has been thought and is available like all other thought to all of us. So any one of us can find that thought, but until we do, we're just looking at other people's opinions and trying to fit them into our own thinking. Right. And so I really think it's, you know, it's wonderful to look at this book and realize this is the person in our era. Not that this isn't in spiritual wisdom and literature throughout the ages, but this is the person in our era who saw something that nobody else saw right then. And it was so certain to him and so obvious to him that he kept talking about it, even though people laughed, until people started to hear and see it for themselves.
When people question, you know, why should I listen to Sid Banks? You know, a mutual friend of ours, Dick Bezoyan, was the head of human resources at BAE, and I always thought it was just twice, but it was 3 times that the PhD physicist from MIT, after a number of years, asked Dick to invite Sid there to teach them, and he taught them physics for 3 days, and they came to Dick and said, would you please hire him back? And after the second 3 days, they came to Dick and said, would you please hire him back for 3 more days? So when a man that's read 4 welding books in his life can have PhD physicists from MIT ask him to come back for 9 days to teach them. So if anybody tells me there's somebody else that they think they think their book is wiser than Sid's, I say, go ask that person if he'd be willing to teach physics to PhD physicists from MIT for 9 days. If he would, then I'm willing to at least listen. I guess I'm just saying something profound happened for this human being. He was allowed to see something very, very profound. And he's tried to share it with us. David?
Philosophy examines the known physical world. Theosophy hosts both the world of form and the formless. To seek truth from the form alone is only half the truth. It traps you in the cosmic lie. That business about philosophy being sort of learned and it's us taking on, you know, what other people have thought rather than necessarily what we've got internally, and potentially gets in the way of our own, you know, our ability to allow ourselves to think more freely. It's an interesting couple of little sentences, I suppose. But it's so easy to get caught up believing in what you've heard rather than what feels right, and trying to help people back to that point of allowing themselves to understand what feels right and what doesn't, and allowing themselves to step away from that lie rather than having to think they need to believe it, is quite something.
Yes. And I think this kind of speaks to this, you know. Ofer, did you want to go forward?
Yeah. I think someone else should read this chapter, this part. It's a teeth breaker for me.
Okay. Brad, do you want to get it?
Yeah, sure. Everyone on earth is both a philosopher and theosopher. One is a learned intellectual process. The other is a realization of knowledge from within the depths of our own consciousness. When I read this line right here, this last paragraph, it really started to it really felt that I could give myself permission to really start trusting what was coming through me. Because it was just, it's a realization of knowledge which comes from the depths of my own consciousness. And before that, I was really caught up in saying what's really true.
Mm-hmm.
But, this was just another one of those, slaps behind the head, as Bill says, or this teacher taps you with the stick when you're meditating. That it was, I have just as much, when I step into that place of consciousness, it has just as much power as anybody else on the planet at that moment when I let my thinking settle. And there's something about starting to trust myself again that started coming from that place.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Very empowering, you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
What did you say, Ofer?
I think that was very empowering.
Yes. Yes.
When you understand that you can actually, especially today, when you have so much sources of information, it's so easy to get lost in it, because you get all the time, you get like a stream of facts.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they contradict, and
Yeah.
What Brad said, when you learn to trust your own insight, it's very empowering.
That's a powerful, that is a powerful statement, and it's true, yeah. Such knowledge cannot be bought or sold like a commodity in the marketplace, nor is it found in some far-off land. It is hidden in the depths of your soul. This is why such knowledge can only be found through an insight from one's own inner wisdom.
I think for me, it makes, when I share the principles with other people, so it makes it easy and hard at the same time. Because it makes it easy because you don't have to think too much about what you're going to say. But it makes it hard because it doesn't matter what you're going to say.
That's very humble and sweet.
That's cool.
This little last page is very powerful, Judy. Very powerful. That's why I think it's all alone there.
Okay. Ofer, would you like to do it or would you like me to do it?
I can read it.
Yeah.
Everyone in this world share the same innate source of wisdom, but it is hidden by the tangle of our own misguided personal thoughts.
I think that's one of the most frequently quoted excerpts from this book.
Mm-hmm.
And it speaks to what you were just saying. Everybody has just been saying in this chapter to me is that it's so easy to get lost in thought, as I tell my clients. So it's easy, I could be sitting there in group thinking about what I have to do next and whether my car is going to be okay and if I have to go to the grocery store or does the cat have food, and I'm not there then. I could get lost in that tangle of thoughts and totally miss the moment and anything I might have that would come through me that would be helpful in the present moment. And I think we do that all the time, and that all this information you were talking about, Ofer, coming at us from so many directions and some of it is conflicting, has added to the tangle of what we can make up ourselves, to the point where we forgot that quietude is the source.
Well, and I'd love to have comments again from the veterans, that at least my experience of working with veterans is, it's not only that, but it's the barrage of memories that get triggered by things on TV, by things they have to watch, what they read, they have to watch the TV show, they have to watch where they go, because you never know when these memories are going to be triggered. And I think for many, that in my work with veterans, the first moment that they had an insight of, oh my gosh, my memories are thoughts also, aren't they? They're not something separate from thought. They're thoughts. Mm-hmm. So hidden by the tangle of our own misguided personal thoughts includes those memories that I find painful. And the whole idea that we're jumping way ahead in the book, but at least from somebody who was taught as a youngster, if you had violent thoughts that you shouldn't have, or you had sexual thoughts that you shouldn't have, you were supposed to somehow magically fight them, get them out of your head, distract yourself in any way you could, think positive thoughts, really, really hard, think positive thoughts, none of which works. But like I say, that unwanted thoughts or memories are a lot like unwanted relatives that come to visit. If you don't feed them, they will leave. And it may take a couple of minutes, but they will leave. And my experience with veterans and people who have been sexually assaulted or sexually abused for years, when those memories get triggered, if they consider it like a bad commercial on TV that you have to sit through and you can't fast forward through, within a couple of minutes, it will go. It will go. And it will lose some of its force field. By the way, if you haven't seen the latest Star Wars movie Solo, I think it's the most enjoyable ever made. So that's just a plug. I get 1.5% interest on that. No, but anyway, but it loses its force field, and I would love to again hear from the veterans if I'm, if that rings true at all. Then, but anyway, I've seen that insight, even that the memories that are getting triggered are thoughts. They're thoughts. Mm-hmm. There's nothing else that comes on the screen of our mind except a thought. I thought something else was on the screen of my mind once, but it was a thought in disguise. That's all there is. Anyway, I'll stop.
It's when you can get someone to the point that they can see that for themselves. It's mm-hmm. so empowering. A light comes on. It's really quite cool to see, and it's not the end of the story at all. The memories will still be there, but that little chink of light is there, and that hope comes back in, and it's, yeah, the only word that can be used, is empowering, because it gives them not control, but gives them a vote in the process, rather than thinking they're a victim of the memories, which is really cool. Certainly sort of my experience so far anyway.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the things that's kind of jumping off what David said too, is you can start to see it a little bit. It's subtle, but it starts working for you. Because I used to be really adamant about watching the door. Kind of when I sat in a restaurant, I had to be kind of watching the door all the time. It was just one of those things, and back myself into a corner. And when I met my partner, Julie, started doing the work together, I was really adamant about that. This is I have to sit here. I have to sit here. Can you sit here? And she was like, was really intent about it. But I just found after a while, after about 4 or 5 months, as I kept working with the principles and kept working my day to day, I found that I could start to let that go. Mm-hmm. you know, and it was gradual enough that until she brought it to my attention, where a couple of times I was sitting with my back to the door, I'd completely forgotten about it at a restaurant. This happened probably about 6 months ago. And I said, oh my gosh, you know, and I saw in that moment that it's okay to sit wherever I'm sitting, because even if something does happen, my wisdom will come online and guide me. Even if something did happen and it did come through the door, you know, I mean, and that was a huge, hopeful insight for me, that if I could see it, there's other veterans and warriors that could also see it too. And that it's just about coming back to the principles, just to those 3 principles, and really just staying with love and understanding. The more understanding, the more my grounding came online, and something shifted. I can't tell you when, but something did.
That's beautiful.
Very beautiful.
Ophir, what were you going to say?
I thought about that I think for myself, and even now for a lot of my the clients I work with and the veterans, they come with a wish that they can control their thinking or change it. And I think and for me, what changed is the attitude. It's like you said, it's the attitude toward the thought. And I think for me, I realized that I sat with another veteran, and we had like a session, and there was a big explosion next to us from a construction site. Sorry. And I remember we both jumped, like really high, you know, we both freaked out. But for me, I forgot about it after a second, and he was still in it. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? What? How come you're not freaked out? I'm freaked out, you see? And everyone, and it was like that, you know, and he was really freaked out about him being freaked out. You know what I mean? And for me, that's when I realized that, okay, I jumped exactly like him, and it even reminded me, but then I could just let it go because I didn't care so much about it. And that's when I realized the change that happened. So I still get the same thoughts, but they don't. I don't get activated by them so much a lot of the times.
That's beautiful. Great example.
It reminds me, my late wife, Sue, who Judy knew, used to say, I realize that I'm either in my thoughts or I'm in my life. And I think as people understand, have insights into the nature of these principles, they live more and more of the time in their life, the present moment, where children live naturally, where we all started, and less in time in their thoughts. So anything before we wrap up the 2nd chapter, and then we can just visit for a little bit?
No, I think that was great.